I'm just trying to remember when was the last time in my life I did a 25-minute speech and nothing comes up. Unless I try to impress a girl in a short time, I have no clue whether I've ever done a 25 minutes. So I'll try. So the topic, interestingly, is unconscious leadership. How many of you think that the decisions that you make in life are strategic, conscious, and rational? Very few hands. So I'm here to prove that 95% of the decisions that you make are nothing rational or strategic about it, but it's coming from emotional or what I call reptilian brain. So I'll explain what it is. Actually, all of you ever used advertising for your companies, you know this truth. There's nothing rational about it. Because advertising never tried to address a rational part of the brain, but it addresses the emotional or the reptilian part of the brain. I'll keep using the word reptilian, but I'll explain what it is. That's how we buy things. But most of us, while we use it for our organization, we don't think about ourselves in that way. That's what I call the blind spot in leadership. Because we think, I'm strategic, I am rational, but we know we use other methodologies for advertising and marketing, but we don't apply that to ourselves to see that where is most of my decisions coming up. I met once recently, a year ago, an HR head of a large Indian organization, and I asked him this question: behind most of what your boss does, what's the drive? He said, getting respect. Nothing strategic. It's much from an emotional thing. I need to be known as respected. Respect is what is really driving me. So I'm going to give a quick look at talking about how illogical we could be while we think it is logical, and what is it that one could do to bring and activate the new part of the brain. So I might not do all the slides that I have because I need to finish this in 25 minutes, but I'll quickly take you through some of the stuff. So we see here, so this is an interesting experiment we did. This was a cup of warm coffee. So the participants were shown the picture of a guy called Joe and given a warm cup of coffee and asked them to write down, what do you think about this guy? And another set of participants was shown the same picture of Joe and gave a cold cup of coffee and asked them to write down, what do you think about Joe? And the people who got the cold coffee didn't have a lot of great things to talk about Joe. And people who got the warm, nice coffee had a lot of nice things to write about Joe. This is how the brain works, imagine. And we think that we are making, and if you ever hired somebody, you know that somebody would have created all the logical stuff. At this point of hiring, what is working is both your emotional brain and the reptilian brain. I'll tell you both how both of them work and take you off the hook at times. So these are the easier way to look at the brain. So there are three. The logical brain on the top is called the neocortex, which is the last evolved brain, the most evolved brain. I believe the hero in Matrix got the name Neo because he's the evolved one. It came from neocortex. So the neocortex is the evolved part of the brain. But just before that, we had something called a mammalian brain, which is prevalent in mammals, where all the emotions are stored, which is a mammalian brain. And below that, at a deep inside of your brain, is a brain called reptilian brain that works on stimulus and respect. So I kept a pet snake at home for a couple of years. And when I come home after work, the snake is not going to wag its tail to show emotion. Because reptiles don't show emotions. They move based on stimulus and response. Their basic survival instinct. That brain is still active inside you. So if you ever heard that in Gurgaon toll bridge, which is not there now, somebody shot at the guy who was in the toll. How come anybody do that? That's when your reptilian brain take over. There's no rational at that point of time. And the poor fellow was, I think, not giving him change or whatever it is. Only that provoked for the neocortex to disappear and the mammalian brain to disappear, and your reptilian brain got triggered, and reptilian brain works for, there are only three important things: survival, fear, and sex. And if you have ever done any of these three things without thinking, you know that you have used your reptilian brain. And it happens. And that brain is extremely active in us, and this is what we try to stimulate when we use an advertising. The neocortex is the brain that think about rationally, evolved. We look at consciousness. So while a lot of books are written about conscious leadership, if our 95% of the decisions are not happening from conscious level of the brain, I thought it's a merit in talking about unconscious leadership. And this is about the reptilian brain, which is. Now, I'm not saying this reptilian brain is not useful. It's highly useful if that is used from a neocortex. Because you might see somebody who is extremely strategic, extremely conscious, extremely pious, but no drive. Because your drive comes from reptilian brain. Drive to succeed, drive to compete, drive to go for it comes from the reptilian brain. But imagine if your neocortex is not developed, all you have is walking around with the drive to do something. Then there is a problem. A lot of driven people, this is what one Sumantra Ghoshal said, you can see a lot of people who have high focus and drive, but no energy. This energy comes from the gut. So that's useful. And the second one is an extremely important mammalian brain if you use it. If you're ever driving organizational change, you know that people don't change much by addressing the rational part of the brain. People change when you touch the emotional part of the brain. The guy who is jumping from a 7th floor to commit suicide hasn't done an analysis using an Excel sheet. He possibly just got an SMS from his girlfriend that I'm ditching you. That's good enough for somebody to jump from the 7th floor. Because the emotional part of the brain, again, have much more power to drive. So I work, all the CEOs whom I worked with, I say that if you're really driving organizational change, find a way to touch the emotional part of the brain. But the question is, you are touching the emotional part of the brain, you're falling in love with everybody left, right, and center, without thinking logically, you are in trouble. So that is why the evolution happened. The first set of organisms had the reptilian brain. The second set, by the mammals, we developed the mammalian brain, and by the human beings, we developed the neocortex, which is the conscious brain. But most of the time, the neocortex or the conscious brain can get hijacked by the other two brains. So you can reflect for a second in your life when you did something that you regret now. Either it was your reptilian brain taking over or the mammalian brain taking over without your conscious brain able to make sense of it. So the question that I've been asking is, how do we really integrate these three parts and use it powerfully? Let's have some fun. So a quick look at this will tell you the basic function that I just explained of each of these parts, how each of these parts will really take. All your autonomous functions like breathing, heartbeat, blood circulation, things that conscious brain find it very difficult to do, is still controlled by your reptilian brain. It can do a lot of things. If you have a phobia, is there anybody here who has a phobia of flying or getting into the lift or anything like that, or jumping into the water? A lot of us have phobias. There is no point talking to your rational brain saying that, no, this is, this is safe, and because it is not in the rational brain, it has gone to the reptilian brain. So you see a signal, you see the aircraft, you see something, it just triggers. Interestingly, stress is because of this. If you want to understand stress syndrome, let's look at what was the biggest threat for a prehistoric man. What threatens his life? What could be a danger for a prehistoric? The man who is living in the cave in the jungle. What's his biggest challenge? Wild animal. So he sees a tiger. What are his options at that point of time? What he can do? He can either run or fight. Now for both, What is he needing to do for his body? If he wanted to fight, if he wanted to run, he need to have more energy. The heart has to beat faster, so the blood can be pumped. One function in your body that takes a lot of energy is digestion. So digestion need to be stopped so that I can use all the energy here. That's why you get these butterflies in the stomach when you get stressed and anxiety, because that's pumping enzyme to stop digestion. And then you need to have more energy to fight, so you can feel that your muscle getting tensed. This was developed to save you, but this went into your the brain, which is the reptilian brain, and today it is not the tiger which is creating a threat. It is either your spouse or the boss, but the reaction is same. Because you don't think rationally. Reaction is heartbeat goes up, muscles are tense, there is a sensation in the stomach, but it's not tiger anymore. Even that simple thing your conscious brain can't figure out. And that's an alarm reaction in stress, because it's already there in your reptilian brain, and you don't think consciously at that point of time. So that's how these brains are designed. This is fun, guys. So I think there is nobody who is below 15 in the room. So you got to tell me, I'll show you a couple of slides, and you have to tell me why there are more bike accidents in Jamaica. And all of you are brilliant guys who are sitting in this room. You'll be able to catch very fast. Okay? Now tell me why there are more bike accidents in Jamaica. Nobody was wearing a helmet. so the challenge is, if a stimulus is given, your reptilian brain picks up that faster than the conscious brain. So we get lost. That's why still we advertise cars. How do we advertise cars? By using something which has no connection with the cars. Right? So how irrational is our buying behavior is still. And how most of the advertising is still focused on either your limbic or the reptilian brain. And we think I'm making a rational decision at this point of time. I have had coach people who bought companies, and to the outside world they said a rational thing. When I had a couple of drinks and talked, they actually gave me an emotional reason. And then, I always wanted to take over something to prove myself. It's coming from a deeper reptilian survival than a strategic decision. But we might think that it's coming from my logical strategic decisions. Yes. So I'll quickly jump into some of the things we can do, because I can go on. I wanted to show, this is fun. Each time when I see in Facebook now people creating all these kind of pictures, I think the more we stimulate our reptilian brain, more we become animalistic. So all the pictures that people put up, I think it has, I always believe that if our lives are what we show on Facebook, world will be a better place. So everybody only say that how blessed I am and where I'm having a breakfast. Nobody want to say that my day is screwed up today. Because that's a social desirability angle to that, which is very, very helpful for your limbic brain, which is an emotional brain. That's why we associate food with a great feeling. It's not food anymore. I feel good. Which is again nothing rational. Anytime when you are having a problem quitting an addiction, logically we know. This is also called the knowing-doing gap. I know, but I am not able to do it because the reason to do a behavior comes from either a limbic brain or your reptilian brain. I want to show you one slide which I wanted to make sure. Yeah, I think this guy uses his reptilian brain a lot. Very powerfully, because reptilian brain is all about survival and the fear, and it can be very appealing, used effectively. So last mass campaigns, there's a whole lot of study about reptilian brain and Donald Trump, and how he has been trying to use that effectively to influence large number of people. But this is not the slide that I said I want you to see. I want to see these two guys. Now I'm connecting this to management. While we use it in advertisement, why aren't we really using this to develop leaders? Why do we have so many narcissist leaders? Why do we have leaders taking decisions which are purely from a survival and drive perspective, without being consciously aware of that. For example, to study that, we have to go back into the management. Who is the father of modern management? Yes. Yeah, say that again, please. Taylor. Taylor is the other side guy. Frederick Taylor. He did a funny experiment in 1899 with a bunch of people. So Taylor is also the first consultant, the so-called consultant in the world. If I tell you what he came up with, all of you will know him. He came up with this study called time and motion study. We heard that? Yeah, so that's what Taylor did. But I don't know how many of you know how he did that. He actually tricked a bunch of Hungarians and told them, I wanted to see. So he was working in a factory where they have to move physically big iron ore from one place to another. And these are this big iron ores, which is around 40 kilos each one. So people manually lift it. He told these 10 Hungarians, if I'm going to double your salary, how many will you be able to do? Show me how hard you can work. So these guys got very excited and they started lifting it up. And he observed them for 15 minutes and did a data calculation and expanded that if they work for 7 hours, considering breaks, he found they can actually do 3 times than they are doing now. And he made into a norm, and Hungarians didn't know that they got tricked. Then they said, you can actually do this every day. That's a possibility. What I say that management initially focused on efficiency. So most Taylor consultants will come and look at how can I improve efficiency. Is one. The other guy actually did an experiment in 1940. It's called Hawthorne Studies. He had this bunch of ladies, 10 of them, and he was looking at the impact of pressure or a positive stimulus in work. So he will ask them to do typing and increase the temperature of the room. Then measure how they work. Then he will reduce the temperature of the room. Then he will reduce the light. They will increase the rise. Whatever he did, performance went up. And he was shocked. Whatever I did, performance went up. Then later he concluded, the fact that somebody is positively watching them and involving them in a meaningful exercise was good enough for the performance to go up. So instead of efficiency, he started talking about people. So all I'm saying is 99% you can avoid reading management books if you know these 2 theories. One focused on efficiency and the other guy talked about people. Most management theories then emerge. Task or people. So all these diagrams that we see all came from these 2 gentlemen to build it. So one kept talking about it's all about people, which is the limbic brain. The other guy talked about it's all about efficiency that we need to drive. Because the focus has been that, possibly the only management institute which has given a lot of emphasis on leaders' unconscious bias initially was INSEAD. INSEAD has a brilliant book called Leader on the Couch, to look at where is this leader's unconscious actions coming from. So let me quickly look at some of the tips that we could do. So I'll give you the last ones. Oh, it's gone. Yeah. So one of the experiments they did with the kids, they found that kids who could not hold and who wanted the sweet right now, compared to the kids who said, I will wait for 5 minutes, when they grew up, the second category, who could hold on for some time for something, had developed much more resilience. So one of the ways to look at it is, when I get this trigger that I need to kill this guy or I need to do this right now, if you can hold on, you're actually developing your conscious brain. Because there is a study by Roland Hayes in Harvard, which he talked about the need of leaders to move from the dance floor to the balcony. So when you move into the balcony, you're not acting, but you're actually, like in a Buddhist concept, witnessing the witness. That helps your conscious brain to relate, because you're not jumping into an action, creating a pause. So these are some of the quick tips. Most of your reptilian and the emotional brain drive for pain or pleasure. I want to avoid pain. I want to get pleasure. So by looking at what are my pleasure drivers what kind of pain I'm trying to avoid in life. Will help you some thinking about how can I strengthen my neocortex, how can I strengthen my thinking brain. I'll give you three very basic steps other than this where people have. One is when people cultivated any practice on mindfulness or meditation, it triggers your neocortex. It helps you to think more. When people work with a coach, because when coaching initially started with something, but as you are sharing something on a long time with the people, that helped to uncover the unconscious needs. Which is, I can give you one of the challenges I used to have. Most conflict that happened in my case was somebody in an authority figure. I never had a conflict with my driver or somebody who worked with me, but I always had a conflict with a senior guy in a corporate world who was so nicely giving me some work. So I used to wonder, why the hell am I having this issue? Then I realized, mostly it happened when I felt somebody is trying to control me. So it's coming from an unconscious. So I said, what's my problem? Then I realized, as a child, one of my big problems was my dad was like a Hitler, who always controlled and told me what to do. And this person has nothing to do with my dad, but my reptilian brain will tell me, listen, Santhosh, he's doing exactly what the dad did. Shout at him, which I couldn't shout at the dad at that point of time. I was able to relate that when I was able to work with a coach. Hey, this is where it is coming from. So I'm not reacting, accepting that and working on that for a long time. That's where I will stop. Questions? Before Amit jump into the stage. Is there any quick questions which you want me to? Yeah. Mindfulness help? Help this? Trigger the neocortex. So what does mindfulness say in an easy way? What does your the reptilian brain or an emotional brain does is move you from the present moment and trigger something inside you. What does mindfulness does? Bring you in the present moment and see objectively what is happening. And if you practice more, you are triggering the neocortex. That's right. Our challenge, by the way, thank you, our challenge is the collective reptilian brain of organization. Let me explain. How many organizations have a higher purpose? When they set a goal, if you're setting the goal is to be something, drive X number, you're actually operating from a driving mode. Or when a Walt Disney say our goal is to make people happy, that's from a neocortex. When a National Geographic say our purpose is to celebrate what is right with the world, that's operating from a neocortex. So I think it's also to address about the collective, really where are we operating from. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Santhosh. Thanks a lot for the stunning interaction. Thank you.